Welcome to Make Today Count, your 60 minutes of fresh conversation served up to inform, educate, and inspire your personal brand. I'm your host, Ross Dean, and each episode I chat to thought leaders, influencers, and experts in their game who all have one thing in common: the desire to go the extra mile, pushing against the status quo to create a richer life for both themselves and those around them. Powered by compassion and driven by the need to leave the world that little bit better than when they arrived. Okay, hi guys, and welcome back to Make Today Count. Great to have you with us again today. Really exciting episode today. We've got hypnotist Doug Sands. Doug, how you doing?
I'm doing excellent. How are you doing today?
Yeah, really well, thank you. It was so great to have you on the podcast today. Really exciting topic, and I know the one that you're so passionate about, hypnosis. You know, something that for many people, that, you know, they may have experienced it before, may not. But I think it's one of those things where unless you've kind of spoken to a professional in the area, you're not quite sure of what to expect and maybe have some preconceptions around it. So what I'd love in this podcast today is to really give the listeners a chance to get a glimpse into kind of your role as a hypnotist, sort of the work that you do as well. And we'll talk about some of kind of the key benefits which you help your clients with, and we'll run through those, if that's okay.
That sounds fantastic.
Perfect. Okay. So what I'd love to do, Doug, for people that haven't come across the work that you do and haven't come across you online, could you just give us a bit of a background about how you got started in hypnosis and bringing us up to speed with where you are today?
Absolutely. It was a bit of a roundabout journey. I always thought that I would be a writer. I thought I'd be working with the written word, either nonfiction or fiction. So that's what I went to college for. But I quickly realized I was more interested in psychology and how the brain really functioned. And so I ended up dropping out of college, trying to find what I really wanted to do. You know, I was spending a lot of money and I wasn't really sure what was a good fit for me. And I ended up bouncing around the US doing a bunch of different seasonal work. And I ended up on a hike that really changed my life. I got lost in a blizzard. And that moment taught me that I couldn't keep living the way I had been living. I was dealing with stress and anxiety and a little bit of depression. And I knew then that I had to I had to actively be a part of my own mental health journey. And so I discovered meditation after that, trying to find something to calm my own anxiety. And when I was looking at the research behind meditation, I discovered a really interesting link between hypnosis. And up until that point, I'd only known hypnosis, as most people do, as like a comedy routine. But it's been used for over 125 years as a treatment modality. And when I learned some very rudimentary tools to manage my own mental health, and I saw the results I was getting just with my limited knowledge, I knew there was something serious here. And so I got certified in it, and now it's what I do full time.
Fantastic. You know, I often speak to people on the podcast, and usually, you know, the road in which life takes them now comes from that moment where they come to a fork in the road and they will go one direction or another. And usually it's based on an event. So in your experience, that blizzard, that must have been, I guess, in the moment, quite a scary experience, and one that kind of prompted you to move off into hypnosis. Tell me a little bit about that time and kind of what you were feeling before and how that kind of helped you in the moment.
You bet. So this was my second or third seasonal job at that time when I was really trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. And I had 10 days left before I was going to leave New Hampshire, where this hike happened. And I should not have been out in those conditions. I knew as soon as I got to the trailhead, like, this was a bad idea, but I was stubborn and I went on it anyway because it was a very famous hike and supposedly it was beautiful. But I don't know, because when I got to the top, I couldn't see more than 10 feet in any direction. And I ended up getting lost on the way down. I couldn't find the trail at all. And so I followed the stream, and night was falling. And yeah, you're right. It was absolutely terrifying in that moment. I remember very distinctly attempting to climb up this hill like 3 different times and sliding back down to the bottom, and then just laying there. And I dealt with suicidal thoughts and depression and anxiety before then. And that was the moment that taught me that I didn't really want to die. I didn't actually want to commit suicide. I
Mm.
simply didn't want to live the way that I was living right then.
Yeah.
And so I got up and I continued on kind of in, I don't know, I guess I was able to shut my brain off and just power through it. But I ended up making it back to my car. And when I got back to, civilization, I thought life would just kind of continue the way it had been,
Mm.
but I couldn't. My body and my mind were so frazzled by that experience. I was literally shaking for about a week. And then
Mm.
I went through a bit of brief depression, and that's when I realized I needed to do something different.
Definitely, definitely. It's these moments, isn't it? When we have these really extreme moments, whatever you do, whether it's in business or whether it's in, life circumstances like you had there, where sometimes it just takes one moment to make that change. And I think sometimes we, especially in our businesses, we sort of move along and we think, when are we going to change things? When are things going to get better? And often just in one moment that we just kind of shift, and that thing that we've been kind of looking for maybe a long time beforehand, where we think it's an ongoing thing, something that we need to work up to, can just shift like that. And it's, I find that really fascinating about when people's lives change like that. So you moved into hypnosis, and as I say, you got accredited and moving forward in that. For people that haven't just come across hypnosis before, or maybe they've had a little bit of taste, and I think, as you quite rightly said at the beginning, some people's kind of preconception around hypnosis may just be what they've seen on the screen, with a pocket watch that goes from left to right, or maybe someone on TV that's told to bark like a dog on stage, or
Yeah.
something like that. Can you just give us a bit of a background about what exactly hypnosis is and why it can be so helpful?
You're absolutely right on those misconceptions. Whenever
Mm.
I'm working with a new client, that's typically the first thing I have to do is break down those old beliefs they have about hypnosis and
Yeah.
then establish what it actually is. So the two really big myths that I get about hypnosis. The first one, people ask, is hypnosis mind control?
Mm.
And hypnosis, you are working with a person's unconscious mind. And that part of their brain stems from that fight, flight, or freeze response that that is essentially there to keep us safe. It's that primal part of us that is always working, whether it's pulling us out of a street before we realize we're about to get hit by a bus or something like that.
Mm.
Your mind is always working to keep you safe. And if a hypnotist violates that trust or makes you feel unsafe in any way, you're going to be brought out of trance. I actually had a hypnotist friend who attempted this in their own informal study. They put their volunteers in hypnosis and then they gave them 5 different suggestions. 4 were beneficial and one was mildly negative, like you'll give me $5 after the session or something like that.
Mm.
Every single time they hit that negative suggestion, it brought them out of trance. Because just like therapy and other types of change work, hypnosis is all about the trust between the subject, the client, and the hypnotist. Their mind is always listening, and so if you give a suggestion that they don't agree with, it's either going to ignore it completely or it's going to interrupt that session because it's that warning light in your mind that says this is not safe.
Mm.
And people ask about the stage shows. What about those people that bark like dogs and dance around like I don't know, whatever. Um, I always remind them that when they're on that stage, they volunteered to be there.
Sure. Yeah.
And there's that unspoken contract between the hypnotist and all of those volunteers saying that, you're probably going to do some ridiculous things on the stage. And, that's part of the expectation. And so that's the first myth I really have to debunk. And the second myth that I have to really talk about is that hypnosis is this magic wand that just fixes everything.
Mm.
And this really comes down to what we were talking about, those change moments. Hypnosis, when a person is ready to change, is an extremely effective tool at getting them to change rapidly. But it all comes down to that willingness to change. We
Mm.
we would call it threshold in the change work. It's that moment when someone can congruently say 3 things. One, something needs to change. 2, it has to be me that changes. And
Mm.
3, that change has to happen right now. And when a person can congruently say those 3 things, change is pretty easy to make as long as you've got the right tools. It's the reason that a parent, or I should say someone who discovers they're about to be a parent, can quit drinking or smoking almost overnight. It's the reason that those huge life events can transform us and, you know, give us a complete 180 in a single day, it seems,
Mm.
because we were ready for it. In my own life, I was building up to that moment for months, for years even, to get to that point. And it was only at that one day that I hit threshold and I was ready to make that change. So those are the two really big myths and misconceptions that I break down in hypnosis.
Mm.
Um,
Fascin-
yeah.
No, I was going to say that's fascinating. So what I'm hearing is that hypnosis is effectively, with the person that's guiding you, relaxing you down, like you said with meditation, down to a state in your body whereby you're able to, I'd say, unlock your unconscious mind. Would that be a kind of a way of putting it, where you're in a relaxed state, relaxed enough to be able to be guided through change work whilst in that subconscious state? Is that okay?
Absolutely. And let's talk a little bit about the brainwaves behind hypnosis,
Mm.
and the link between that and meditation. So, our brainwaves during normal conversation, just like we are right now, they're hovering in what we call beta frequency. And some argue about what that is, but I think it's about 20 to 12 different hertz or frequency, the brainwaves.
Mm.
Anyway, below that, you have alpha, and that's where you're at when you're in a light trance, whether you're zoning out in the car or, I don't know, getting lost in a good book or something. Below that, you have theta, and theta is that golden sweet spot of hypnosis. That is that really creative zone, that frequency that we pass through right before we fall asleep. That's kind of why hypnosis looks like sleep. But when you are in hypnosis, you're listening to every single word that a hypnotist is saying,
Mm.
because hypnosis is all about focus. I mean, if you can't hear what a hypnotist is saying, you're not going to be in hypnosis. But the brainwave patterns, when you're in theta, in that creative state, there are two things that happen. One, the creative side of your mind turns on, and you start communicating with your mind in a language it understands. So your unconscious mind, it communicates with you in, it doesn't often say uh, directly what it wants in language that we speak in. Like, it doesn't say it in English.
Yeah.
It communicates through feelings and images. That's why we get that gut feeling, and that's why when we remember memories, we're playing a movie in our heads. That's
Mm.
our unconscious, talking to us. When we're in that theta state, we are able to turn on our creativity and then communicate with it in a language that it understands. And the other side of that, in that theta state, is the critical faculty, that gatekeeper of our mind that really sorts out the information we want from the information we don't want. It's a little more permissible. People call it suggestible, but it's not quite that, because um, when you are in that state, your mind is still working for your benefit. It is
Mm.
just a little more open um, to positive suggestions, if you will.
Mm. Amazing, amazing. And I think, just as a side, that makes me think of, I speak a lot with clients that I have around kind of flow states and ways in which, where they could be doing their job, doing their, the work that I do in photography, or maybe sports people when they're doing their sport, that kind of flow state where they are doing what they love and it just feels so good and fluid and that kind of thing. Is that quite similar to what the brain is doing at that point, in that kind of, it's almost, you're functioning, but it's in more of a relaxed state where everything just moves more freely?
You're absolutely right. That flow state is, I don't know if it's all the time going down to
Yeah.
theta, but it's definitely going into alpha. And sometimes when you're really in that zone, you are dipping um, into that theta state. And
Mm.
just a word on meditations, I realized I hadn't actually made that connection. When you're in solo meditation, your brain is speeding up. I mean, it's actually going the other way, away from hypnosis. But when you're in guided meditations, that's that weird little middle zone between
Mm.
hypnosis and meditation. You're actually dropping down, just like flow state, into alpha and sometimes into that theta state.
Mm. That's amazing. And I know from my own experience, I've through meditation and also, through hypnosis that I've had in the past, that it for me, I'm guessing it kind of feels differently for different people, but for me, it just feels like kind of a weight coming down on me. My
Mhm.
shoulders drop, and it for me, when I was asked before what it feels like, it's like having a heavy warm blanket on me, and just as I'm sitting there, it just kind of feels nice and calming and heavy. I guess the experience is different for different people, would you say?
Absolutely. And for those who have meditated, they often say it just feels like a really deep meditation session. But
Mm,
people come out of it and they say it felt like I was floating, or I was doing a backflip underwater, or some people say it, I was just really relaxed, just sitting there in a chair. Like there's no one hypnotized feeling. It feels a
yeah.
little bit different for everyone.
Wow. And can anyone be hypnotized? Is it something that certain people can and can't do, or is it something that everyone can get involved with at some level?
I believe that everyone can be hypnotized because we're
Yeah,
doing it to ourselves all the time, whether we're zoning out into a
true.
good book or movie, or driving on the car or at the highway and we're zoning out, whatever it is. It's the same thing. It's that same mental muscle. Now, there are people who are a little disposed to having some trouble. As I mentioned,
Okay.
hypnosis is all about being able to focus. And people with attention disorders like ADHD and ADD, they sometimes have some difficulty. And some hypnotists believe that those with analytical minds are, like doctors
Mm,
and physicians
yeah.
and people who are really in the numbers, that they have a difficult time turning on that creative part of their brain in the theta state.
Mm.
But I personally believe that you just have to work with those people in with different techniques. There's a saying in hypnosis that there aren't any resistant clients, there are only inflexible hypnotists. And so it's my
Yeah.
job to really meet the client where they're at and work with them with the tools that they need to get the success they need.
Yeah, I guess it's like anything, isn't it? When you're working with someone, it's that consultative phase at the beginning, which enables you to build rapport with that person and to find out exactly, what makes them tick and how they work and what goals they have. And I'm guessing for you, it's just kind of like a problem solving, trying different approaches to in the end get them to where they want to go.
Absolutely. And you brought up the idea of rapport, and that is critical in hypnosis because at its core, it's kind of a weird concept. You are basically closing your eyes, which in the primal sense that's dangerous. You've known this person perhaps
Yeah.
for,
Yeah.
I don't know, 20 minutes, and now you are closing your eyes and letting them give you suggestions. You've got to have a very deep rapport with that person because that trust is really critical for hypnosis to happen.
Mm, exactly. So, we've spoken about kind of like those initial stages, how it feels, and the calming benefits, and how it takes you from really unlocking that subconscious mind. And I know a lot of the work that you do is around helping people through different challenges and so forth. What kind of challenges can hypnosis help with, and what kinds of things do people come to you with? I'm guessing it's wide ranging and very varied.
Yes, it is definitely varied. I really focus on mental health issues because that was a
Hmm.
very huge part of my own journey. I I specialize in anxiety relief, and I also work with depression. And I should say, with those two things, I cannot legally diagnose anyone with depression or anxiety. And so when
Sure.
someone comes in and they say, "I have anxiety," that I can't technically work with that, and I say that. Um, I can't technically fix your anxiety, but I can reduce the stress and the difficulties that you're having in your life. And if the anxiety just tends to go away, that's fine by me. It's just kind of a language workaround. But um, the other things that hypnosis is really good for, it's extremely good at relieving pain because pain is simply a signal that our mind is or our body is giving our brain. And now, acute pain, like a broken bone or something, we don't work with that with hypnosis. I'm talking like chronic pain, things
Yeah.
like fibromyalgia and other long-term pain signals that are essentially redundant. It's also very good at building up confidence and changing mindset. There's an offshoot of hypnosis called NLP, and if
Yeah.
anyone has heard of Tony Robbins, he's
Mm.
famous for bringing this um, hypnosis style of mindset tools to the business community. So
Sure.
that's one thing. Um, there's also some very interesting research on hypnosis for physical problems like muscle growth for sports performance. It's actually also approved by the National Cancer Institute as a treatment modality. And
Wow.
so there, the more I'm learning about hypnosis, the more
Mm.
I'm still blown away by just how much you can do with it. And I think it all comes down to that every single issue that we're trying to fix in our life, it all has some mental component to it.
Mm. Definitely, definitely. And I know, you mentioned there some of the key ones that you work with specifically. I'd just like to jump on those if we can.
Mhm.
The first being anxiety, and obviously, that span from your story and your past experiences. How can hypnosis help with anxiety predominantly?
So, anxiety is a loop that we run in our heads.
Mm.
So, most human emotions, they last somewhere between 90 seconds and 3 minutes. But with anxiety, we're replaying that same emotion again and again and again.
Yeah.
Oftentimes, it's because we had I don't know if it was a mild trauma or like a major trauma in our past. Somewhere in our past, our mind had an experience that taught us we are not safe. And so we have to be hyper vigilant to make sure that we are always on guard so that that never happens again. And what we do in hypnosis, one thing we can do, we can go back and change the actual memories. And every single time we're accessing memory, whether hypnosis or not, we're changing it. We're actually rewriting the protein structures. I believe it's kinase C that forms these memories. In hypnosis, we're simply doing that intentionally. And we're not erasing memories. I've had some people come in after they've had a really hard breakup and they say, "Can you make me forget my ex?" And it doesn't quite work that way. What we do instead is we remove the emotional charge of that memory. And so when you do that, all of the coping mechanisms that have been built up, whether it's emotional eating or drinking or gambling or sex addiction, whatever it is, that have been built up on that story that your mind has repeatedly told itself. When you change that story, the foundation of all those negative things starts to crumble. And so I'm always amazed at the stories I hear from my clients, 2 to 3 months after. I was working with, let's call this guy Bill. He was an executive out of California, and we worked on a fear of mountain biking. And after that, he called me up 2, 3 months later, and he said that other fears had naturally started to fall away. He'd been
Mm.
accelerating in his business. He even started a blog that he'd been dreaming about because one simple change, when it's done so far back in our timeline, in our memory, it can really, really impact the different coping mechanisms and the different structures that we've built on that.
Mm.
And that's one of the most effective ways that I know personally to make change with anxiety. Another really effective way that I often work with is simply giving people tools to interrupt that anxiety and then go on a new path. When I discovered meditation on my own journey, it wasn't so much that meditation made me feel calm. It was an interruption in that loop. It was a gap between the feeling of anxiety and the reaction that I had to that anxiety. And simply knowing there was that gap, that I could extend that gap and do whatever I wanted, change course from that. That was really empowering. And with that style of hypnosis, it's all about empowering people to realize that anxiety is not something you have to live through. You can change your own emotions. And then we're simply giving them tools and making them, or I should say, giving them the motivation unconsciously to use them and work with those beliefs around what is possible with anxiety.
Yeah. That's fascinating. Just to go back to your first point there, when you mentioned about kind of the knock-on effects that just changing one part of, I guess, the challenges that you have can unlock so much else. And I've had that experience myself, the past year with physical exercise and diet and that kind of stuff. And it's something that I wasn't concentrating on, hadn't been concentrating on up until then, and then kind of I started to, and then there was kind of a switch, and that once positive progress was starting to be made in that area, so much else unlocked in different areas. It's amazing how that works, isn't it?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. What I find time and time again is that both negative and positive changes, they're uh, self-replicating or self-supporting systems. You know, a negative change, if you start drinking, it starts impacting your life and you start going in a negative spiral. But the same is
Mm,
true for positive changes. When you start improving your health, your identity changes, and your the beliefs you have about yourself change, and that improves your relationships and
mm.
the way you see the world and perhaps your business or your work. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. It's just an upward spiral.
And I know one of the other areas that you do a lot of work in is around weight loss, and that's something that people may not be aware of that hypnosis can help with around changing your physicality or your shape. Just gives a little bit of background about kind of how that works.
You bet. There are a lot of misconceptions about weight loss hypnosis.
Hmm.
People think they come into a session and you just wave the magic hypnosis wand and they drop
Yeah.
50 pounds by the end of it. And it doesn't quite work that way. What we do, we're working on the beliefs, the motivation, and the self-confidence that underlie those problems that created that extra weight in the first place.
Hmm.
And so hypnosis is extremely good at doing that. And so when a person, typically in their first session, we will work on their identity and really change at such a high level that when they walk out of that session, they're a completely different person.
Hmm.
They believe that they are healthy, and it simply takes a couple weeks for their body to catch up to that. I mean, the changes physically don't happen immediately. I mean, I think the average weight loss is um, I don't know, 1 to 2 pounds per week for
Yeah.
that. That's like healthy weight loss. But when you really change the identity of that person from being unhealthy and overweight to being, whatever it is for them, thin or healthy or athletic, then it's simply a matter of catching up.
So I guess it's like giving them the opportunity to change their relationship with food or exercise, which may be the contributing factor, which means that previously if they thought that they couldn't do something, maybe they overate or they didn't exercise so much. And so with a lot of these things, it is like you say, there's a neurological element to this that often is at the heart of some of this stuff.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more.
It's amazing. um a lot of the people that listen to the podcast are business owners.
Mm.
In sort of high performance roles and that kind of stuff. I'm guessing that hypnosis can be really powerful in those areas as well. Maybe if someone's building a business, or maybe they're looking to enhance their performance in those areas.
Absolutely. It is so powerful for that. We all know the buzzwords around mindset and getting our heads in the right place for our businesses. And
Yeah.
personally, hypnosis has been huge in my own business journey of building a hypnosis business, because I have used self hypnosis to overcome those limiting beliefs and improve my motivation and really hone in on what it is that I want. And hypnosis, it doesn't have to be um, it doesn't have to be woo woo or really out there. There are some hypnotists who will take it there, but for me personally, I really hone in on the science behind hypnosis. And um, for business people, when it comes to building confidence or overcoming a fear of speaking, that's really big, and that's actually one of the areas I'm expanding into in my business.
Mm.
It's Hypnosis is such a powerful way of changing that, because as we mentioned, with when you're changing memories or building in new resources and new beliefs, when you change at that fundamental level, every single thing that follows is different.
Mm. It's interesting, isn't it? There's often what we perhaps think is the challenge or the issue. Once we've kind of explored it, maybe it just doesn't tend to be the reason we thought of. Maybe, and as a byproduct of that, all this stuff kind of just unlocks before our eyes. It must be for the people that you work with that have these kind of transformations. It must be kind of like a mind blowing moment for them.
Yes, it is. And you're absolutely right. The hypnotists often joke that the issue is never really the issue. Someone
Mm.
comes in for a fear of snakes, and it's actually because they had an argument with their parent once, and they had a garden hose in their hand or something. It's
Okay.
random, the ways that our minds can really make those different connections with different sensations and different memories. And one thing I should mention about working with memory and past trauma. Unlike therapy, hypnosis doesn't require that you really dive into and unpack whatever it is. I often say that therapy is like taking your emotional baggage and opening it up and sifting through it, whereas hypnosis is just taking that baggage and throwing it out the window. You don't actually have to know what it is to work that change. Sometimes our unconscious minds actually block out a memory because it is so painful, or we just simply don't want to relive it. And so, in those cases, you can negotiate with a person's unconscious mind to simply get rid of the problem without actually having to relive it. So, hypnosis is, in my opinion, a very effective way at dealing with past pain and past trauma without having to go through those painful memories. And I know that's um, a really big hurdle for people to overcome, because we don't want to go to a therapist and have to relive all these memories. And so that's just a some I should say it's a misconception that people often have about hypnosis.
That's a really great point, because I think there's probably a lot of people out there that maybe have got certain challenges, but maybe haven't spoken to, either yourself as a hypnotist or maybe in therapy in that circumstance, because there's maybe a lot of shame attached to the challenge that they have. Maybe there's a lot of fear attached to the challenge that they have. So knowing, I think from what you're just saying, from knowing that they don't have to delve so far into what the challenge is, it's more around how they feel about certain things and allowing them to unlock it that way. That must, I think if more people knew about that, there'd be so much more people coming to have those conversations with therapists and hypnotists like yourself.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And when someone, especially with anxiety or depression or
Mm,
anything like that, when they get that transformation and they realize with their whole being that they don't have this problem anymore,
mm,
it is so transformative, and it really kickstarts that upward spiral we were talking about.
yeah,
They realize that they have so much more control over their own life than they ever thought possible.
yeah. And I know traditionally, seeing a therapist or a hypnotist, hypnotherapist would be kind of a one-to-one in-person situation where you go to their office and you'd have a sit-down conversation. Obviously through the over the past year or so, we haven't been able to do that so much with various lockdown situations and those sorts of things. Now, what was really refreshing that I saw is that you look after a lot of your clients through the way in which we're speaking today, through Zoom and other platforms like that. Can you just talk around how you kind of perform those? And I'm guessing that as long as you've got the video connection and the audio connection, you're good to go, right?
You've got it. I actually built my business to be 100% online from the
Mm,
very beginning, even before COVID. And so I
yeah.
guess I got lucky that way. Um, I built it that way because I travel a lot and I have a lot of adventures and I wanted that flexibility. And when I started, there were a lot of the big names in hypnosis who said that you cannot do hypnosis online.
Okay.
Like you can, of course, to put a person in hypnosis, you can do it over the phone,
Mm,
but they were saying it really helps to have the person in your office so that you can monitor any negative reactions or anything like that. I simply found that when you pre-frame things like, if the connection is lost, then you can simply attend to your breathing and come out of it, and
yeah.
everything will be fine and we'll connect again. Things like that, when you simply pre-frame what might go wrong, you are really heading it off at the pass and you don't have to deal with those issues anymore. And now that COVID has happened, I've found I'm actually seeing a lot of the really huge names in hypnosis. They are actually transitioning to
Mm,
100% online because they're realizing, one, just how much freedom it gives them as a business owner, two,
mm,
how many people they can help, not just in their local area, but around the country or around the world, and three, just how effective it can actually be to do hypnosis online. Because you have, when a person is doing hypnosis online, they're often in their familiar setting, whether that's their living room or their bedroom or, I don't know, a friend's house or something. They're not coming into some strange person's office and sitting in a chair that
yeah.
they don't know. And hypnosis being all about that rapport and that trust and that feeling of safety, that is huge. I've actually found that I've been able to get higher success because of
Mm.
that feeling of safety that people are in a familiar setting and they're ready to change.
Absolutely. I know you, it's funny you mentioned Tony Robbins a little way back in the chat, and he's seen his business change too far. They used to have these massive events where they had 20,000 people each time and that kind of thing, and they're all doing those online now. Via this kind of multi Zoom effect, TV screen, these events. So I think many people have had to change what they're doing. But exactly like you say, there's so many ways to connect with people, and especially if people are in those situations where they are a little bit reluctant as to whether it could be a good fit, they can be in an environment like their home where they feel more comfortable. So surely in that circumstance, if you're in your home environment, you're going to get the most out of the session because you feel more relaxed.
You've got it. I had a woman who was very nervous about hypnosis, and I told her, like, during our session, like, if you don't feel comfortable, just reach up and close the computer screen, and that's it. And
Yeah.
just joking, it's um, just having that ability, that more control over it. They do feel so much more relaxed and so much more able to make those changes.
Mm. An element of hypnosis that some people may not be aware of is kind of around how long do these things take, because obviously with everyone these days wants things to happen quickly. They want the Amazon Prime of hypnosis, probably, where it just turns up immediately. Is it I'm guessing it depends on the person, the challenge, and a lot of other factors, but generally, is this something whereby you can cater for them within a session, or is it a few sessions, or how does it kind of work?
Yeah. A lot of hypnotists will say they can cure any problem in a single session. And while I believe you can absolutely make huge changes in a single session, it's kind of inelegant because imagine you wanted to build a house and you had a plot of land, but on this plot of land was this huge rubbish heap. First, you had to, you've got to get rid of it and clear out the land and then build the foundation. And you can do that, I don't know, in a 90-minute session. We could put in, I don't know, like a bulldozer, blow it up and slap up this outhouse on this little plot of land. But I find that when I've got more than one session, I'm able to not only build on the changes that we did in the first and second session, but also to make sure that everything is structurally sound. So I typically recommend that clients at a minimum come in for 2 sessions. I
Sure.
often see people for about 2 to 4 sessions. And though it's not an immediate fix in that sense, even in that first session, we make some powerful changes. We do a lot of heavy lifting in that first session. And that really encourages people because they realize that if they can change that fast, then they get so hopeful about what's coming for that second, third, and fourth session.
Absolutely. I think there'd be a lot of people that are listening to our conversation today, Doug, and they maybe unlock something and they kind of think, I want to, maybe it's something I need to try. Maybe I've tried some other things and I really want to give hypnosis a go. If someone's kind of looking for a coach to work with around hypnosis, what are some of the key things they need to sort of look out for so they can ensure that they're getting someone that is going to be a good fit for them?
You got it. There. So unfortunately, there isn't a government board of hypnosis. There just
Okay.
aren't enough hypnotists to qualify for the bureaucracy of
Mm.
regulating it. There are a bunch of private organizations that certify hypnotists and kind of attempt to regulate it. Over in the U.S. here, we've got, I think, 3 or 4 of them that
Mm.
attempt to be the one regulatory board of hypnosis. I would say that that's a good marker, but it's not the only. It's not the only sign of success for hypnotists. I would say look at their website. Does it look professional? Do you actually trust that this person can help you? Look if you can find their work somewhere else besides their website. Are they
Mm.
featured in newspapers? Do they have podcasts out? Do they have YouTube videos and other things? Um, and if they've got free resources on YouTube or Instagram or Facebook, test them out. Because as we mentioned, hypnosis is all about that rapport, that connection with your hypnotist. If you find someone and you think they're the only person in your local area, so that's your only option, it's not that case anymore. the even the biggest names in hypnosis are now going online. So if you
Mm.
find a hypnotist that doesn't really mesh with you and you don't feel that connection even before you sign up for that session, don't go with them. Find someone else, because when you have that connection, the change is so much easier to create.
Yeah, definitely. And for in regards to the actual process that you take a client through, I mean, we mentioned before that we had those consultations at the beginning, but kind of just gives a little bit of a timeline as to kind of the experience around working with you, how it kind of goes.
You bet. So all of my clients go through a 15-minute strategy session, and that's just to outline exactly what they want and how we can do that. And then we schedule the sessions, typically 2 to 4. And from the time they contact me and we have that session, I would say it's probably about a week before
Mm.
we find a time that works for both of us. And then they have that first session. And for people with mental health issues like anxiety, that is huge, having that rapid turnaround.
Mm.
Um, and so I really strive to keep at least a few spots open so that I am able to deal with people who come in with immediate problems that really need to be addressed. But then in subsequent sessions, I typically recommend that you have at least a week between sessions. So if someone signs up for a 4-week program, I don't know, it takes about a month to make that really big change. And
Yeah.
talking about the big changes, whether it's weight loss or anxiety, we are breaking down those changes into smaller steps, smaller achievable goals, so that it's not like we're attacking one single stone of depression or anxiety and just throwing everything we can at it. We're breaking it down, and then we're making it manageable so that each single session we're getting some small win to encourage them through the process.
Absolutely. You mentioned before about all the different people that you have the opportunity to work with, and you mentioned about the guy who ran the mountain biking, and how all these other things start to unlock in his life and move in such a positive direction. Were there anything else that I'm guessing that there's some really proud moments that you must go through with clients, whereby they've come into their consultation and they've been a completely different person to then what you see in a few months. Any stories around those to share at all?
Absolutely. And just so you know, I am bound by HIPAA
Mm,
confidentiality. So
of course.
all the names are changed. So I work a lot with adventurers because that's kind of my story.
Mm,
I do a lot of hiking and skiing and traveling and that kind of thing. So I was working with this rock climber who she wanted to she wanted to do some of the really famous hikes in South America. It had been on her dream bucket list for so long, but she was struggling with financial things, and she had a little bit of anxiety and a little bit of other mental health issues that were presenting. And so we just started breaking things down, and she wasn't expecting huge changes in her life. She came in looking to just manage some anxiety and be able to hope essentially for what this dream would be for her. And when she realized the changes that she was making, she, like me, also got so interested in it that I ended up seeing her for, I think, 10 sessions or something over the course
wow.
of the journey. And
Mm,
since then, she's climbed those mountains, and
wow.
she's actually started a business around climbing that she's doing what she loves, and
Mm,
it's so rewarding. And one other story, uh, working in the mental health field, it is a bit it's emotionally taxing because you have to work with someone. You don't know if they're suicidal, you don't know how they're dealing with this trauma or whatever
mm,
pain is presenting in their lives. And when you see a person transform their lives in such a way that they no longer have this issue, that is so rewarding. I know a lot of hypnotists who really shy away from that, but I lean into it because the risks are high, but the rewards are so great. And one of my clients, I don't know, let's call her Annette or something. Annette had been dealing with depression for 10 years. And she came in to see me, and she'd literally just, for a lot of my clients, I'm a last ditch effort because people are, hypnotism is still not really well understood. But I actually think that works in my favor because people say, if this doesn't work, I don't know what's going to, I don't know what
Mm.
is. And
Yeah.
that actually gets them to that point of threshold that we were talking about earlier. So in Annette's case, she had depression for 10 years and someone recommended she come in to see me. And when she came in, her face, her demeanor were just like, um, the only way I can describe it is gray.
Mm.
She didn't have any emotion showing on her face. She didn't really talk much during the session. And by the third session, it was like someone had pumped life back into her, and she was talking, and you could just see the lights coming on behind her eyes and in her cheeks. And since then, she's really made some powerful changes in her life, and those are the ones that are really rewarding to me because when I was dealing with my own mental health issues, I
Mm.
also felt like there was no hope, there was no possibility of change. Like this was probably how my life was going to be forever. And when you show someone that it doesn't have to be that way, the changes that they can make even after the session, they just blow my mind.
Yeah, I mentioned before, this in all the conversations, it has some link to this that I have on the podcast, and that, from a challenge that my guests have comes so much positivity, so much power from within them that they're able to go on and help so many more people. It's like this ripple effect.
Mhm.
And I'm guessing that's why, you feel so much joy and so much, you feel so proud around the work that you do, because you can really associate that with the challenges that you had and the work that you've done. So that must just be amazing for you.
Yeah, it's it's very rewarding. I when I first got into hypnosis, I was a bit resistant because I knew there were a lot of misconceptions and people thought it was strange. But
Mm,
now that I'm in it and now that it's what I do full time, I am just amazed at how I can help people. It's
yeah.
so rewarding.
And Doug, you're obviously helping your clients, checking in with them regularly, making sure they're okay running sessions. What I'm really interested in is, how do you ensure yourself that you can show up in the best way for your clients? Do you have things that you do that you've learned over time, things that you do on a daily basis, which you find really work to ensure that you can be at your best when you need to work with your clients?
I do. So for many people, it all comes down to the morning routine, and that's
Mm,
true for me as well. Meditation is still a very big part of my life. When I
mm,
started learning hypnosis, I thought, what? I'm learning this new tool, and I'll just leave meditation by the wayside. But they're two different mental muscles. Like they're very linked, but they give different benefits. So I start off every morning with 20 minutes of meditation, and then I do like 10 minutes of self hypnosis, and that even though I've made some powerful changes, we're all constantly looking to grow, whether it's in business or our relationships or whatever it is in our life. And so, just like with my clients, I break down my big goals into smaller goals, and I've actually got those written out on a list. And so,
mm.
every day I look at that list and say, what do I want to tackle today? I do one small little chunk of it, and then I just go about the rest of my day. But one thing that really helps me get in the zone before doing anything, whether it's a podcast or it's a speech or it's a client session, is a technique called the triple warmer. And I can walk through it for your audience. It's actually
That'd be
very easy
great.
to do. Yeah. Um, I'm not exactly sure where this comes from. I think it comes from, I think it's got links to ancient Chinese medicine and Qigong, but it's also very heavily linked to acupressure and acupuncture. So if you look on the back of your hand, there's a channel between the metatarsals running from your wrist to that first knuckle of your hand. And that channel between your pinky finger, your smallest finger, and your fourth finger on the back of your hand, if you take your three fingers on your other hand, they kind of fit really nicely into that channel. And so to use the triple warmer, what you do, you tap with three fingers on that channel on either hand, and then you start saying affirmations to yourself. And you say them as if they are already happening, like, I am a confident person and I am having a great time, things like that. And what I quickly find is that when I say affirmations without doing that, they sound nice, but within about 60 seconds of tapping on that channel, on that triple warmer, I start believing those. And it's amazing the changes that come out of that. And the more you do it, the more that that powerful, that empowered feeling becomes anchored to that spot. And so, just to recap it, it's the channel between the fifth metatarsal and the fourth metatarsal on the back of your hand. You tap there loudly enough that you can hear it, but not so loud or not so hard that you hurt yourself.
That's amazing, isn't it? And what's the kind of thinking around why that works so well?
Personally, I don't exactly know the science behind it. It's just one of those techniques that
Yeah.
someone encouraged me to try once, and I've fallen in love with it. And it's not it's not just me. I should say it's not just like a placebo effect. It's actually got some energy work. Someone tried to explain it to me once. It's like energy work and clearing the meridians. But
Okay.
I've seen this create powerful changes in clients, both working with depression and anxiety. I've had people, I should say, one of my mentors used this to help a person clear up some dissociative identity disorder. And it's a very powerful technique. I'm not exactly sure on the science behind it, but
Mm.
it's one of those things that's a little more woo woo, and it just works, so I use it.
Yeah, and great also because you can be anywhere when you're doing it, and it's quite discreet as well, isn't it? So you don't have to worry about, say, maybe looking at a place in certain places, or it's something you can do anywhere.
Exactly. I've done this in, a hotel bathroom before a conference or
Mm.
something like that. And one of the powerful things about it is that you don't have to say it aloud. As long as you say it in your head like you're
Yeah.
hearing it, as long as your brain is picking up that auditory signal, it still gets the same effect. So if you're doing it in a bathroom, you don't have to be saying affirmations to the entire men's room or something like that.
That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That'd
Mhm.
be good. That'd be good to try out. Um, the podcast is called Make Today Count, and the reason for that being is that my aim is for people to get involved with new conversations around building their own personal brand, whether it's around business, maybe it's around lifestyle, maybe it's around health, and some of the mindset and all the things we've spoken about today. And if they wanted to get a little bit further into the conversation, to give them kind of something actionable that the next day they could go and kind of explore. If someone was if they were listening to today's conversation and they thought, I love what Doug was saying, and maybe maybe I need to give hypnosis a shot. What would be kind of that one tip, that one small step that they could take tomorrow, which not necessarily hooks them up with a hypnotist or something like that, but just gives them maybe the first step in getting them prepared for those conversations?
I would say find some free hypnosis and test it out, because only when we experience it do we really drop those misconceptions about what hypnosis is.
Mm.
And I often find that first time clients, they have those misconceptions, and when they experience it for the first time, they're blown away by how comfortable and how normal the process seems. And so that's why I actually give away free hypnosis every Friday on my Instagram channel. And it's not just me putting people through um, like a nice feeling. It's me actually using tools from the therapy room for a general audience. I've done things like anxiety relief, seasonal affective disorder. I did
Mm.
one on panic attacks. I believe that one is out already.
Mm.
And that's a great place to start. My handle is at making your meaning. And if they don't want to start there, I would say find some free hypnosis anywhere on the internet, or simply look into the research on hypnosis. It's been approved by so many different organizations, from the British Medical Association to the American Medical Association to
Mm.
the American National Cancer Institute, as we mentioned.
Yeah.
There's over 125 years of research. And if they want to dig into that, I would say that's a great place to start.
Amazing. So check those out. We'll put those links into the show notes. So if you're listening to the podcast today and you want to check out those, we'll hit the links up so you go and visit those. For you're working with a lot of clients at the moment, all over the world through the Zoom conversations. Anything new that you've got coming up that you want to kind of share about today? Obviously, we've spoken about the Instagram stuff that you're doing regularly, but you mentioned before about, I think I'm right in saying that public speaking was something that you're looking to offer services around.
Absolutely. So, as with anyone building a business, I'm always looking for new areas of growth. And that's really been one that that keeps coming up in my life. Like personally, I've always wanted to be a public speaker, and I've been able to do that with hypnosis. And I realized that there are a lot of fears around public speaking, clearly, but uh, hypnosis is so effective at doing that. And really, what I'm focusing on with public speaking is expanding into um, not so much the confidence, like feeling really good about it. It's about changing that identity of being someone who doesn't speak publicly to someone who is comfortable on
Mm,
that stage. And so that's really what we're building up with that. And the other area that I'm really excited about, passionate about right now is my own podcast. And
mm,
I call it the Making Meaning podcast because I've found that as we're searching for our purpose in life, it really comes down to that we have to create that purpose. We have to make that meaning for ourselves.
yeah.
And it's just getting started. I started in summer of 2020, when we all had a little bit more time on our hands.
Mhm. Yeah.
But it's really started to pick up. And I've interviewed quite a few very interesting adventurers.
Mm.
And it's more of a passion project. But if that sounds like something anyone would be interested in, uh, it's the Making Me podcast on all the different podcasting apps, and those are my big projects right now.
Amazing. And I'll be sure to put those links in the show notes as well so people can get those and check those out when they need to. Doug, it's been amazing speaking to you today. I love to always finish up with some gratitude. Gratitude's hugely important to the work that I do and the people who I connect with. So just thank you for everything you're putting out into the world. I love to speak with people that are just making such a proactive use of challenges that they've had in the past and are able to pass that on and pass on that knowledge and experience to make such positive change in the world. So thanks for all you're doing, Doug.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on the podcast as well.
Thank you so much. Guys, what I'd love to hear is if anything has really resonated with you on the podcast today, let us know. Either get in touch with Doug or myself through Instagram. Or if you'd like to, you can subscribe to the podcast if you haven't already done so and leave us some feedback as well. We'd really love to hear feedback on what was that aha moment for you during our conversation today. Plus, you can always leave us a review on iTunes, on Spotify, or even on Alexa with your Echo device there as well, if you need to. And if you're also looking for a proactive area of the internet where you can meet up with like-minded people who all want to build a proactive, creative, personal brand, check out the Elevate community over on Facebook as well. But until next time, I've been Ross Dean. This has been Make Today Count, and I'll see you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.